The old leather-bound book sat on my lap, its pages thin and fragile, whispering secrets of a time I never knew but felt in my bones. It was my grandmother Rose's diary, and its presence was a bridge to her, a way to hear her voice again, even though she'd been gone for years. Outside, the rain painted shimmering streaks on the window pane, a gentle rhythm against the quiet hum of our house. My son, Jack, who was all of 7 years old, sat on the floor, meticulously building a castle of colorful blocks. He was a creator of worlds, his small brow furrowed in concentration. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with the soft sounds of our separate, peaceful activities. "Mom," Jack said suddenly, his voice pulling me from my reverie. He didn't look up from his masterpiece. "Do you think Grandma Rose would have liked my castle?" The question was so simple, yet it landed in my chest with a profound weight. It was in these small, unexpected moments that I missed her the most. I looked from the diary to my son, a living, breathing continuation of a story that began long before him. "Oh, honey," I began, my voice a little thick with emotion. "She wouldn't have just liked it. She would have loved it. She would have sat right there on the floor with you, and she would have known the name of every single knight and dragon in your kingdom. She would have even given the cook in the kitchen a funny name." Jack giggled, placing a final triumphant red block atop the highest tower. "And what would she say about the moat?" he asked, pointing to the blue blanket he had carefully arranged around the base. "She would have said it was the most treacherous, crocodile-infested moat she had ever seen," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "She would have probably made you a paper boat to sail across it." That was the essence of my grandmother Rose. She didn't just observe life, she dove into it, sprinkling it with magic and imagination. She saw the world not just for what it was, but for what it could be. And as I sat there, with her diary in my hands and her grandson on the floor, I felt an overwhelming urge to share her with him, to let him know the woman who had so profoundly shaped the mother he knew. I gently traced the gold-embossed letters of her name on the cover. "Jack," I said softly, "would you like to hear a story about Grandma Rose? A true story from her own words?" He finally looked up, his bright, curious eyes meeting mine. He nodded eagerly, abandoning his castle for a story he knew, instinctively, would be far grander. I opened the diary to the first page, the elegant cursive a testament to a world of patience and grace, and began to read. I cleared my throat, the crisp, old paper cool beneath my fingertips. The date at the top of the page was written in a youthful, looping script. June 12th, 1958. I could almost picture her, a girl with a ribbon in her hair, sitting under a willow tree and writing these very words. "Today," I read aloud, my voice adopting a storyteller's cadence, "something quite extraordinary happened. Papa said we were only going to the market for flour and eggs, but I knew better. The air itself smelled of adventure." Jack crept closer, his chin resting on my knee, his eyes wide. The marketplace was a whirlwind of noise and color, a dragon of 1,000 different scales. There was Mrs. Gable haggling over the price of tomatoes, her voice like a squawking hen, and Old Man Hemlock, whose beard, I am quite sure, is home to a family of sparrows. But I was on a mission. I was searching for the wizard. Jack gasped. "A wizard? A real one?" I smiled and tapped the page. "That's what she wrote. Let's see." I continued reading. "He wasn't a wizard with a pointy hat and a long white beard. Papa says those are only in stories. This wizard was disguised as a simple flower seller, but I saw his magic. He had buckets overflowing with zinnias the color of sunset and daisies as bright as a new coin. And he had roses. Roses the color of cream, with just a blush of pink at the edges. I only had 1 penny, saved from last week's chores. I approached him, my heart beating like a drum. "Sir," I said, trying to sound very grown up, "I would like to purchase your most magical flower." He looked down at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He had a kind face, weathered by the sun. He didn't laugh. He leaned in close, as if sharing a grand secret. "Magic flowers," he whispered. "Choose their own owners." He gestured to all his buckets. "You must listen carefully and one will call to you." So I did. I closed my eyes and listened past the market sounds. I listened for a whisper on the wind, a tiny floral song, and I heard it. A single, perfect rosebud nestled amongst the others. It hadn't even bloomed yet, but I knew it held the most magic of all. I pointed. "That one." The wizard smiled. He snipped the rose from its branch and handed it to me. He even refused my penny. "A magical rose must be a gift," he said. "Now its story is yours to tell." All the way home, I held my rose, imagining the incredible adventures it would have once it bloomed. I looked down from the diary. The rain had softened to a drizzle. Jack was silent, his gaze distant, lost in the sun-drenched marketplace of 1958. He wasn't just looking at a red block castle anymore. I could see it in his eyes. He was now imagining a single perfect rosebud, waiting to bloom with all the magic in the world. So what happened? Did it bloom? Jack asked, his voice full of hushed urgency. Was it really magic? I think, I said, turning a delicate page, that the magic was in how she saw the world. She found wonder everywhere. I scanned the next few entries, which were filled with sketches of birds and pressed flowers. Then I found it. A new entry, dated a week later, June 19th, 1958. I began to read again. My rose bloomed this morning. I knew it would be today. When I woke, the first ray of sun was pointing directly to the little vase on my windowsill, like a spotlight on a stage. It is the color of the inside of a seashell, the softest pink, and it smells like summer mornings. Its magic is quiet, but very strong. When I held it, I felt brave. So I took the rose with me to the creek behind our house, the one Papa says is full of slippery, moss-covered rocks. I've always been afraid to cross it. The water rushes so fast, and I imagine it wanting to pull me away. But today, with my rose tucked behind my ear, I wasn't afraid. I told the rose we were on an adventure, like the knights in my books. The rocks were the heads of grumpy giants, and we had to be light on our feet to not wake them. I took a deep breath and took the first step, and then another. I didn't slip. I didn't fall. I made it all the way to the other side. The other side of the creek isn't much different from our side. There are the same trees, the same ferns. But to me, it felt like a new country, a land I had discovered all on my own. I sat there for a whole hour, just watching the water, my brave little rose still beside me. The wizard was right. The story of the rose was mine to tell, and it was a story about being brave. I finished reading and looked at Jack. He was staring at his own feet, wiggling his toes. The giants were sleeping, he whispered, completely lost in the tale. They were, I confirmed softly. He looked up at me, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. So the magic wasn't a poof? He asked, making a little exploding motion with his hands. The magic was being brave? That's right, my love, I said, my heart swelling. That was Grandma Rose's special kind of magic. And the best part is, you have it too. I tapped his chest gently, right over his heart. He giggled and swatted my hand away, but I saw the way he sat up a little straighter. The stories were working. The bridge was being built, connecting a boy in his blanket moat castle to a girl on the other side of a creek, all those years ago. Jack was not ready for the story to be over. Read another one, he pleaded, pointing at the diary. Please? About another adventure. I smiled, happy to oblige. Let's see what else she wrote. I flipped through more pages, the scent of old paper and pressed flowers filling the air. I saw sketches of elaborate cloud shapes and a list titled, Good Names for Stray Cats. Finally, I landed on an entry that seemed perfect. August 2nd, 1958. Ah, I said. This one is about the annual town fair. I began to read. The prize for the best cake at the fair this year is a blue ribbon the size of a dinner plate. I have decided it will be mine. Mama is letting me use her recipe for lemon sponge cake, the one she says is sunshine you can eat. I have practiced twice. The first cake was a little lopsided, like a leaning tower. The second was much better. I am ready. But when the big day came, everything went wrong. Mr. Henderson's dog, Bartholomew, started barking right when I was taking the cake out of the oven, which startled me so much I dropped it. Not on the floor, thank goodness, but it landed with a sad thump on the counter. A great crack appeared right down the middle like a canyon. Then, to make things worse, I realized I had used salt instead of sugar in the lemon icing. It was a disaster. There would be no blue ribbon for me. Jack looked devastated. But she practiced. She did, I said, and continued reading. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried for 3 whole minutes. The cake was ruined. The icing was a salty tragedy. But then I looked at the broken cake. The crack didn't look like a mistake anymore. It looked like a river. I remembered my adventure at the creek. I thought, this isn't a broken cake. It's a map. My tears stopped. I got the little jar of blue sugar sprinkles and poured them into the crack to make a sparkling river. I broke up the salty icing into crumbles and sprinkled them around the cake, calling them stones of the salty sea. I took my ruined cake outside, not to the fair, but to the backyard where my friends were waiting. I told them I hadn't won a ribbon, but I had brought them a treasure map made of cake. We used twigs to dig for the blue sugar river and pretended the salty bits were cursed jewels. It was the best game we had ever played. We ate the whole map, even the salty parts, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. I closed the diary for a moment. Jack was quiet, but a slow smile was spreading across his face. "She made a new game," he said. "Like a real adventure." "She did," I answered. "She took something broken and sad, and she made it into something fun and happy. That was another one of her special kinds of magic." "She ate the salty parts?" Jack asked, giggling at the thought. "That's silly." "Sometimes the silly parts make the best memories," I said, winking at him. "Are you ready for another one?" He nodded enthusiastically, pulling his blanket moat a little tighter around his shoulders. I turned the pages of the diary, passing a drawing of a particularly magnificent spiderweb, until I found a new heading. October 10th, 1958. "This one," I said, "is about the fearsome giant who lived next door." Jack's eyes widened. "A real giant?" "Well, a giant in his grumpiness," I clarified, and began to read. "Mr. Abernathy, who lives next door, is a giant, and his castle is a rickety old house with a crooked porch. He doesn't have a club or a battle axe, but he has a voice that rumbles like thunder. 'Quiet down out there,' he bellows from his window whenever we are having too much fun. He says our laughter hurts his ears. I think he is the guardian of a very delicate treasure: silence. Today, I was practicing my curtsies in the yard, pretending I was a princess. My crown was a wreath of dandelions. Of course, I tripped and fell, and let out a very unprincess-like shriek. The thunder voice came instantly. 'Silence!' I felt my face get hot and my eyes start to sting. It wasn't fair. How can a person be a princess in complete silence? Then I thought about the wizard and the rose. Maybe Mr. Abernathy wasn't just mean. Maybe being a guardian of silence was a very lonely job. It must be sad to guard a treasure that no one else can enjoy. So I decided to give him a gift. A quiet gift, so as not to disturb his treasure. I searched the whole yard for the perfect thing. I found it at the base of the big maple tree. A single leaf, painted with the most brilliant shades of red and orange, like a tiny autumn sunset. I tiptoed to his crooked porch and left the leaf on his doorstep. I didn't knock. I just left it there. A silent offering for the silent guardian. Later, I peeked from my window. I saw the front door creak open. Mr. Abernathy bent down slowly, picked up the leaf, and looked at it for a very long time. He didn't look like a thunder giant anymore. He just looked like a man holding a pretty leaf. The next morning, when I went outside, he was on his porch. He didn't smile, but he gave me a small, slow nod. I nodded back. The giant and the princess had called a truce. I looked up. Jack was staring towards the window, as if he could see Mr. Abernathy's house right through our own walls. "The leaf was a quiet treasure," he said, more to himself than to me, "so he wouldn't be lonely." "A truce is a good thing," Jack said solemnly, arranging his stuffed animals into a line of defense along the blanket moat. "It means no more yelling." "Exactly," I agreed. "It means understanding. Are you ready for the next adventure?" He gave a firm nod, his line of fluffy soldiers standing at attention. I turned the page. A faint, spicy scent seemed to lift from the paper, and the next entry was titled, November 5th, 1958. "This one is about making magic potions," I told him. Jack's ears perked up. "Like turning frogs into princes?" "Not quite," I smiled. "More like capturing happiness in a jar." I began to read. "Today, I decided to become a potion master. My laboratory was the back porch, and my mission was to create a potion of pure happiness. A single drop, I imagined, would make you laugh for an hour. To start, I needed ingredients that were already happy. First, I gathered pine needles from the big tree because they smell like Christmas, which is the happiest day of the year. I added a spoonful of dirt from the garden because that's where the flowers grow. I sneaked into the kitchen and borrowed a sprinkle of cinnamon because it smells like warm toast and my mother's hugs. For the final, most powerful ingredient, I found a fallen feather from a blue jay, because blue is the color of the sky on a perfect day. I put everything into a glass jar, added water from the rain barrel, and stirred it with a special stick. I sealed the lid and shook it 7 times, because 7 is a magical number. But when I opened it, it didn't smell like happiness. It smelled like wet dirt and confused spices. It was a failure. My magical career was over before it began. My mother found me sitting on the back steps staring at my jar of brown water. She didn't laugh. She just sat next to me and looked at my potion. "The magic doesn't always come from the mixing," she said gently. "Sometimes the magic is in the things themselves." She took the cinnamon from my pocket and we smelled it. It smelled of warmth and kitchens and love. We held the pine needles to our noses, and they smelled of high branches and endless forests. The magic wasn't in the jar. The magic was in the ingredients. The world, she told me, was already full of tiny, separate potions. You just had to remember to stop and smell them. I paused. Jack was quiet, his hand resting on his teddy bear. So the potion was already done? He asked. Exactly, I said. She just had to learn how to find it. Jack snuggled deeper into his fort, the world of the diary now as real to him as his own bedroom. Okay, he said, his voice soft. I'm ready for the next one. I smiled and let the book fall open to a new page. The handwriting was a little different here, smaller and more precise. The entry was dated December 1st, 1958. This adventure, I began, is about the secret, invisible world. I started to read. The world turned gray today. The sky was the color of a dish towel, and a cold wind whispered that winter was truly here. I felt gray and quiet myself. I decided that if the world was going to be full of secrets, I would become a spy and discover them. My mission was to observe the inhabitants of my own house. I hid behind the big armchair and watched my father. But he was not a secret agent. He was just reading the newspaper, his brow furrowed. I crept to the kitchen doorway and spied on my mother. She was not mixing a secret formula. She was just peeling potatoes, the skins falling in a familiar soft rhythm. It was all very ordinary. Being a spy was not the grand adventure I had hoped for. The world, it seemed, was keeping its secrets to itself. Jack looked a little disappointed. No secrets? Not the kind she was looking for, I said, and continued. I went to bed feeling that I had failed my mission. But when I woke in the middle of the night, the world had changed. A hard frost had come, and it was a master artist. It had painted the window pane with ferns and stars made of ice. I pressed my face to the cold glass and looked outside. The invisible world was suddenly visible. The frost had traced the shape of a perfect spiderweb on the fence post, a web I had never noticed before. It had outlined every single needle on the pine tree, making it glitter under the moonlight. It even showed the faint, crisscrossing tracks of a bird who had walked across the lawn. The frost wasn't hiding the world. It was showing me the secrets that had been there all along. It had found the hidden patterns and made them beautiful. I was a spy, after all. I hadn't needed to hide behind a chair. I just needed to look closer. The magic wasn't in finding out what people were doing. The magic was in seeing the beauty that hides in plain sight, waiting for a quiet, frosty night to show itself. I paused my reading. Jack was looking at the patterns on his own blanket, his finger tracing the stitched lines of a dragon's tail. The spiderweb was a secret treasure, he murmured. It was, I said. A treasure for a spy with patient eyes. A spy needs good eyes, Jack repeated thoughtfully, his gaze still fixed on the intricate patterns of his blanket. What's the next adventure? I smiled, feeling the rhythm of our storytelling settle comfortably between us. The rain outside had long since stopped, but we remained in our own world, contained within the pages of the old diary. I found the next entry, dated January 15th, 1959. The ink was a little faded on this one. This story, I began, is about the house orchestra. I read the entry. A great snow has fallen, burying the world in a deep, white silence. We have been trapped indoors for 3 days. The roads are gone, the fences are gone, even the grumpy giant's house next door is just a soft white mound. At first, it was an adventure, but now the silence is too loud. The house feels sleepy and boring. Nothing is happening. I complained to Papa that the house was broken, that all its sounds had been lost in the snow. He chuckled and told me I just wasn't listening properly. Every house has its own orchestra, he said. You must be the conductor and find all the players. I thought he was being silly, but he told me to close my eyes and listen. So I did. At first, I heard nothing but the boring old silence. But then I listened closer. I heard a low, steady hum from the kitchen. That, I decided, was the big bass fiddle. Then came the steady tick-tock, tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. He was the drummer, keeping perfect time. A soft whistle came from the wind blowing over the chimney top. The flute, playing a lonely, high note. I sat there for a long time, my eyes closed, conducting my secret orchestra. The house made a sudden creak as it settled in the cold. That was the cello. Mama started knitting in her chair, and the soft click-click of her needles became the castanets. The house was not silent at all. It was full of music. It was telling me a story about being warm and safe, while the world outside was asleep under a white blanket. I was the only one who knew its song. When I finished reading, I didn't say anything. I just listened. After a moment, Jack closed his eyes too. A slow smile spread across his face. "The refrigerator is the bass fiddle," he whispered, not opening his eyes. A floorboard creaked upstairs. "And that's the cello," he added. I nodded, my heart full. He was conducting his own orchestra now, a maestro in a castle with a blanket moat, finding the music that was all around us. "I think I'm a conductor too," Jack announced quietly, his eyes still closed. He hummed a low note, mimicking the sound of the house. "Okay," he said, opening his eyes again. "All business. Next adventure." I smiled, my heart feeling lighter than it had all day. "I think there's just enough light for one more before bed," I said, though I knew we would read to the very end. I turned the pages carefully. They were getting thinner now, closer to the back of the book. I found an entry near the beginning of spring. March 20th, 1959. "This one," I said softly, "is about saying goodbye." I began to read. "My best friend, Clara, is moving away. Her father has a new job in a city so far away it doesn't even feel like it's on the same map. We had our last day of adventures today. We visited all our favorite places. The creek with the sleeping giants, the big maple tree where we look for quiet treasures, the field where we pretend to be explorers. But every adventure felt sad. It felt like we were saying goodbye to the places, too. It felt like our shared kingdom was shrinking until it was just the small space between us, and soon that would be gone, too. We sat on her porch steps and didn't say anything for a long time. The sun was beginning to set, painting the clouds pink and orange. I told her I was afraid we would forget each other, that new friends and new adventures would fill up all the spaces in our minds where our memories lived. She started to cry, and then I did too. But then I looked up at the sky. The first star was peeking out. I remembered the wizard telling me that magic chooses its owner. I remembered that a treasure map can be a cake, and a potion can just be a smell. And I had an idea. "We can't share a backyard anymore," I told her, "but we can still share the sky." Her crying slowed. She looked up. "The sky?" "Yes," I said, feeling the magic of the idea bloom inside me. "We can promise to look up at the same moon. We can tell it our secrets, and it can be our messenger. When you see the moon, you'll know I'm seeing it too. It can be our new kingdom." We made a very solemn promise right there, under the first star. It was still the saddest goodbye I've ever had. But it wasn't just an ending anymore. It was also a promise to keep looking up. I finished reading. Outside our own window, the gray day had finally given way to a deep twilight blue. Jack was quiet for a long time. Then he crawled out of his fort, went to the window, and pressed his hands against the glass, looking up into the evening sky. "The messenger is coming," he whispered. I closed the diary, the sound of the leather cover shutting softly in the quiet room. The last page was read. Jack stayed at the window, his small silhouette framed against the deepening twilight. The first star of the evening was just beginning to make its faint appearance. He turned to me, his face serious. "So even when she was sad," he said, "she found a way to make it an adventure." "I think," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name, "that was her greatest magic of all." I stood up and went to stand beside him at the window, putting my arm around his shoulders. We looked out at the familiar street, but I saw it differently now. I saw the secret music in the hum of the street lights, the quiet treasures in the patterns of the last few leaves clinging to the trees, the silent truce between the darkened houses. I saw a world that was not just what it was, but what it could be. A world brimming with stories waiting to be told. The diary of my grandmother, Rose, was not just a collection of memories. It was a manual for living. It was a testament to the power of imagination to transform the mundane into the magical, to turn loss into a new kind of connection, and to find bravery in the face of fear. She hadn't just told stories. She had lived them, and in doing so, she had passed down the ability to see the world through her eyes. "Mom," Jack said, his voice a sleepy murmur as he leaned against me, "can we have an adventure tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I whispered, kissing the top of his head. "We'll find a new kingdom. Or maybe a secret message. We'll have to listen carefully." He nodded, his energy finally spent. He had sailed across treacherous moats, crossed creeks on the heads of giants, eaten treasure maps, and called a truce with a grumpy giant. He had conducted an orchestra and spied on the secret world. And now he was ready for sleep, his head full of the quiet magic of a girl he had never met, but who he now knew so well. As I tucked him into bed a few minutes later, I placed the diary on his bedside table. It was no longer just my connection to my grandmother. It was his too. The stories were a bridge, not just to the past, but to the future. The ink was faded, the pages were fragile, but the adventures of Rose were just beginning. They would live on, whispered in the quiet moments, in the space between a mother and her son, forever promising to keep looking up.